Kalmyks are the Western Mongols that came into Russia proper in the beginning of the 17th century from Central Asia into Russia. My name is Alexei Ivanchukov, and I'm a Kalmyk Mongol born in Bulgaria. Then found myself in during the war in Germany, and from Germany we finally emigrated to the United States, and presently I'm a retired U.S. government official living in Arlington, Virginia.
The Kalmyks belong to the western branch of Mongols known as the Oirats. Historically, the Oirats were composed of four major tribes: the Jungar, which were later recognized as the Kalmyks, the Torgut, the Dorbet, and the Khoshat. At the end of the 14th century, the four tribes formed the Dorben Oirat alliance between the chief members. This alliance united the Western Front. The minor tribes of the Oirats included the Khoyod, the Bayad, the Nengyet, Zakhchin, Bahtud, Barga, and the Darhat. After Chinggis Khan, the man who united the Mongol tribes, passed away, the tribal wars and the political realignments continued. The northern Mongols, the Halha, and the southern Mongols, the Chohar, together comprised the eastern Mongol group, who became distinguished from the western side. The Oirats on the western side inhabited the steppe and river valleys between the northern Xinjiang and the southern Altai ranges. In the 17th century, the Dorben Oirat alliance sought leadership from the Jungarian chiefs Karakul and Batar, which coincided with the Manchu expansion through conquest of the Ming Empire and control of the northern and southern Mongol groups as tributaries. The Oirat area had come under their domination by 1750. During the second rise of the Oirat alliance, there was a migration of some Oirat groups from northeast Xinjiang. The migration was either a protest against the increasing power of the Jungar nobles or overpopulation with a necessary search for new pastures. In Mongolia, the Kalmyks led a nomadic lifestyle, living in round felt tents called gers and grazing their herds of cattle, flocks of sheep, horses, donkeys, and camels.
I guess there was a political situation in Central Asia where they wanted to leave and find a new place where they can live with their animals and so on. So finally they ended up in southern part of Russia between the Volga River and Don River area near Caspian Sea, and they settled down and eventually became part of Russia. As you know, my last name is Ivanchukov, and the Ivanchukov family among the biggest family among the Kalmyks living in emigre. It all started like this because one of my grandparents' name was Ivanchuk, and when the Russian did the census, so they all taking all these Kalmyk Mongolian names and Russianize it. My mother's name was Sakha, and my father's name was Sanja. My parents ended up in Bulgaria. This was during the Russian Revolution, when the Bolsheviks and anti-Bolsheviks were fighting each other for the, and of course my father and rest of the Kalmyks, they were anti-communists, and they fought the Bolsheviks with the Russian Cossack units against them. So finally, at the end of the thing, they ended up in Crimea, and from Crimea they emigrated for wherever country they were able to. So some of them went to Bulgaria, some of them went to Serbia, and some of them ended up in France, some in Czechia, and some of them, just a few people were in Poland. So when the white Tsarist movement ended up or lost the war, their war against the Bolsheviks, so they ended up in Crimea, the southern part of Russia, and from there they were tried to emigrate to whatever part of Europe they can get. So my parents ended up in Bulgaria, and this is where I was born, my 3 sisters and brother. My father family, the Vanchukom, they were one of the biggest horse breeders in southern Russia. So he grew up only working with horses. So he knew horses like his 5 fingers. So I remember still as a kid, he would go to where the horses were sold. He would open the horse's mouth and he can tell exactly how old was this horse and what shape it was. So therefore, for him, not knowing Bulgarian language and not having any other professional skills, so he had to try to find any kind of job in order to provide for his family, that is his wife and 5 children. So it was very difficult lives for him. But at the same time, he was always correct and thinking about his family. So he would send his children to a Russian immigrant schools. So was myself also. Is because they always dreamt or wished they would someday go back to their native country. If they do that, so his children should be able to speak Russian language. Like myself, I was going to elementary school run by the Russian immigrant, and of course they were of excellent quality, good teachers. That language of instruction was Russian, but by Bulgarian law they had to teach Bulgarian language, history and geography. Our life was not easy because we were not accepted as part of Bulgaria, so we were as refugees and were not allowed to become a Bulgarian citizen, to have a passport. But this Norwegian philanthropist Nansen, he volunteered to issue Nansen passport for all these refugees in Bulgaria. So my parents had this Nansen passport. I was in the 3rd grade when the war started, and the Soviet forces were coming very close to Bulgaria. So from people knowledgeable of the political situation from Germany told us that we should not stay in Bulgaria but try to get out as soon as possible. So we left Bulgaria on the 2nd of September 1944, and on the 10th of September the Red Army marched in Sofia. We were just lucky just to get out of there for a nick of time. So we ended up as refugees in Nazi Germany, and then of course we were placed in refugees camps and then shuttled back and forth, and the war was coming to an end. And then again we heard from Kalmyks telling us that we should not stay in the Austrian part of Nazi Germany, but we should move into Bavaria, where it's going to be occupied by the American forces. So we were again on the road to get to Bavaria, so we've been caught by American forces. And after the end of the war, we ended up in refugee camps. First, we were in Bavaria, maybe about 100 kilometers from Munich, but one of our elderly person knowledgeable in education, he arranged for all school-age children to go to Munich, where the Russian community organized a secondary school and secondary school like gymnasium. About 50 Kalmuk kids, we came from the center of Bavaria into Munich, and our elderly person, he was in charge of all of us, looking after us, our well-being. So we all started going to different grades of the gymnasium. In this displaced person camp, there were nationalities, I don't know how many, 5 to 6 different Russians, Ukrainians, Lithuanian, Estonians, Serbians, Polacks. So it was a mixture of all these different nationalities. So we play with them and learn from each other, each other's language. So it was very interesting. Meanwhile, everybody was emigrating to different parts of the world, mainly to Canada, United States, and some South American countries like Venezuela, Brasilia, etc. But for some reason, we Kalmuks were unable to emigrate because we were considered Asians. So the quota was not accepted. So we lamented, but we couldn't do anything. But our friends, especially in the United States, they were trying to do the best to persuade the U.S. government to let us come to the United States. And one of the biggest person who was trying to help us was the Tolstoy Foundation of Russian organization in New York area, was headed by Alexandra Tolstoy, the youngest daughter of the Leo Tolstoy, the famous Russian writer. And they were able to persuade the United States Congress to allow us to come to the United States, because based on that we lived for 400 years in European part of Russia, and that our language is related to Hungarian, Estonian, and Finnish. Based on that, they decided we were not Asians, but Caucasian race, and therefore they lifted the ban, and we were able to come to the United States. We ended up in 2 groups, each of us about 100, 150 people grouped. So our group, we ended up in a Liberty ship that brings US troops to Germany, and on the way back they would take refugees to the United States. So we ended up in a ship called General Hershey. And this was in end of December 1951, and it took us 2 weeks to cross Atlantic Sea. We ended up in New York Harbor on 25th of December 1951 on Christmas Day. Of course, the immigration offices was closed because of the holiday, so the ship anchored not far from the Statue of Liberty, And since it was a Christmas day, they served us turkey dinner and pumpkin pie right next to Statue of Liberty. So on the next day, on the 26th of December, we disembarked. We processed through, and they were put on buses, ended up in Violin, New-Jersey. Since we were a big group, they couldn't find a big place to accommodate us, but they had this barracks where after we ended up in barracks, we were especially myself, I was so disappointed because we just left barracks, we ended up in barracks. But the people, the Church World Service, Tolstoy Foundation, they were in charge of our resettlement, said, no, this is only temporary. So our family was the first one to leave this Parving Park camp in Violin, New Jersey, first one, and we ended up in Lakewood Freehold, Howell Township, New Jersey, for our first lives in the United States. I was a mason's helper, and I got to know my first American friend, where his name was John Urban. He was the mason, and I was his assistant helper, hod carrier. And thanks to him, he introduced me to the first American ways of life. First of all, he took me to Italian restaurant and he introduced me to pizza. So I wondered, I said, what kind of pizza is it? Now, what is it? So let's go. We went to one in Lakewood. Went to Italian restaurant and we had my introduction to pizza. Then the next thing he introduced me to we went to a roller skating ring. So we roller skated. So, but through him I improved my English language, and at the same time I learned about the everyday life in the United States. Then the next thing I got a job is with rock factory, Karagujan. So I was making $1.60 an hour. It was a big money for me. My friends and neighbors sent me a letter and said that I have to go to the army. So I was drafted, and I was sent to Camp Gordon, Augusta, Georgia, at the U.S. Army. If you were in the United States about 6 months or over, you could apply for citizenship. So then I asked one of my American friends, name was Leonard Borman. He was also an anthropologist who lived in Philadelphia. So I wrote a letter to him asking what do I have to do. So he found out exactly, said what I had to do. He said, go to your commanding officer and ask him to process paper to be for papers for American citizenship. So I filled out all the application and so on, and then the next thing came that I had to have 2 witnesses. So my first sergeant went and took 2 other sergeants, said, you going to be your witnesses. So they signed the papers, and soon after that I was ready to become a U.S. citizen. So on the 7th of January 1954, I became U.S. citizen, just shortly before being 2 years. The Quaker Guild, they had a summer camp, about 20 to 30 youth helping out the Kalmyks to settle in the United States. So